Hello. Give it just another minute here. Hey, Paul.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Doing a lot better than a couple weeks ago.
I understand.
So, Jeremy, I think you have the only item on the agenda today, so you can take it off whenever you're ready.
Awesome. I will do that.
Take it away, perhaps, is what I was looking for.
Paul, are you host?
I have just become the host.
Awesome. I need to screen share.
Well, you now have that capability.
Perfect. So, yeah, so I think this might end up being shorter, but just kind of wanted to come back to the cluster ID doc that we talked about a couple weeks ago now, a few weeks ago. Been a crazy couple weeks. Time has flown, but there's been some updates. So it seemed like last time we discussed the doc, and just kind of for context, the idea with cluster ID was that maybe instead of just trying to create some cluster ID resource, we look at this as individual claims. So some new CRD that basically just holds a bit of information with a name, in a few cases, well-known names that we can use to highlight certain pieces of information that we think are useful basically everywhere. And the two that we kind of came down to were this id.kates.io claim that would be a clusters identifier. So a valid DNS label and unique within a cluster set, but preferably unique, in a broader scope within your organization, or whatever seems reasonable there. And then the cluster set.kates.io, which would be the identifier of the cluster set to which a cluster belongs, and that might be like the ID of that cluster within the cluster set, or it might be the ID of the cluster set itself shared between clusters. Basically, this identifies to the cluster which cluster set it belongs to. I don't know that we need to go beyond that in terms of like defining exactly how this gets used. So that's kind of the background. And then one of the open questions was this idea of a signature. So it seemed kind of non-controversial to have a simple CRD with a name to identify the claim, and maybe you could add your own foo.com / whatever, or some personal claims to extend these well-known claims. We wanted to leave that open, and some value, some claim-dependent string that can be whatever format is necessary for that claim. But I guess the open question was whether we should actually have a signature. So, it seemed reasonable, I think, that there would be some way to validate that this claim is real. But basically what it came down to last time was, I'm certainly not an expert in this, and it didn't seem like anyone on the call really, was invested in this. So we'd reach out to SIG Auth. So I spoke to Mike Denise, and the takeaway was basically that, a signature in this case may not be that useful, because anyone, like, what are we verifying it against? And there's some ways that could be defined, but the takeaway, and I think he actually commented here, was there's no real reason why he didn't really see the immediate use case or value here, and there's no reason why we couldn't add this later. So maybe we just keep it really, really simple to start, and just go with a name and a value and a CRD and we have this id.k8s.io for the cluster ID, and a clusterset.k8s.io to identify the cluster set to which a cluster belongs.
I like that a lot better than creating a resource. And I have the same thought in my head around signing, in terms of like, what would we validate it against?
Right.
Typical, like, easier to add later than to force yourself to think of it now, and there's not like a clear answer.
Exactly. And presumably it's set by someone, like, presumably you don't give everybody right permissions to these claims. And so, there's some level of admin access required to modify these. And it seems like it would be hard to make it so that that same admin couldn't fake them. So, that's one side of why maybe that should wait. And then, in terms of like a cluster set, if you did have a registry or something, it seems like the registry would really be responsible for verifying this claim, not the cluster itself. So yeah, nice and simple this way. And there were some comments too on from Michael here, suggestions that like maybe we consider like a region.k8s.io to make it easy to figure out where a cluster is, things like that. And while I don't want to get into that here, because I feel like, we could come up with a very, very long list of potentially useful, well-known names. This opens that door, so we can start saying like, hey, what are the other useful values that I'd like to know at the cluster level?
I think that I like the idea of exploring other ones. It seems like a separate thing than cluster ID to me.
Exactly. But once we have this, hopefully it's easier to add those, because we've got this concept of like a cluster claim. And then, once we get this through and we start making this a real thing, then we can have other separate conversations about what other claims would be useful to have.
So can I think cluster claim might have been my original naming, which you should not let me name things, because as I stare at it, I realize we have one other thing called a claim, and it means something entirely different, which is a persistent volume claim. So maybe claim is the wrong word here. Maybe like fact or assertion or statement or something that isn't a claim.
Yes, so I wanted to basically get to the point today where we turn this into a KEP, and I'll write that out and basically take this and put this into a KEP. And a big part of that is coming up with a better name. I don't know what the name should be. I'd love input. Yeah, cluster value, cluster field. I don't know. There's a lot, and there's a lot of options, and I'm not sure if any are great. And if that's the hardest part of this, that's great.
Yeah, we can do the bike shed after the KEP is written.
Yeah, that was my thinking too.
And this might be another good thing to like. Sorry, I was reading the comment. It might be another good thing to do like a community-based naming exercise.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Like this, we could spend a lot of time on this, and I think, just we'll get really good, I think, with multi-cluster stuff about sending out those surveys. But yeah, we can figure that out once we kind of agree that this is a good direction. And I do think claim probably makes less sense too, because without the signature, it doesn't feel so much like a claim. But yeah, we could talk about names forever, and that doesn't seem like a great use of time right now.
Okay, so we're ready to move to cap then?
It sounds like it. Cool. All right. Then I'll get working on that and share it out as soon as it is ready.
All the caps. Wonderful.
Perfect. Well, that was all I had.
So here's one thing that I think it would be good to cover in the cap. Or if not cover in the cap, maybe we can just like reaffirm this is a thing that we should be thinking about. So we've had like this thread of discussion over like last several years around like the registry resource, and I think our latest like conventional wisdom and sort of proto consensus within this group is that we wanted to avoid a premature standardization on a registry resource. If we have a way to express what the idea of a cluster is, it might be a fruitful next step to think about how would we use that as a coordinate in APIs that need to make references to clusters.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I have these like high level user stories. I think as part of this KEP and making it real, it's like bringing examples to these user stories. Like how does this actually solve those problems?
Mm-hmm. Are you looking for help fleshing those out?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I have some ideas. So why don't I get this down, into a PR, and then, like it would be good to have other people chime in with potential use cases and patterns that they think make sense. I would love help on this. But yeah, it might be easier to do on a KEP versus this doc.
Yeah.
Cool.
Excellent. Sounds like we're kind of talked through, unless anyone has extra stuff for the agenda. But I think that was the only agenda item for today.
I think so too.
Before we sign off, let me just make a call for if you have any demos you'd like to share that are, relevant to the conversation, or something that, maybe is like a next step or further down the road that you're thinking about. Like, I think we'd love to see them, especially things you may have already built to solve a problem that you faced.
Yeah, more demos, please.
All right. Well, awesome. Have a nice day, everybody. See ya.
Thank you all. Thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.